And we are live. Welcome to the stream. So very exciting today because I'm joined by a very special guest, who is Pixie. Pixie, how you doing? You good?
Yes, I'm good. I'm vibing. I'm here, ready to talk.
Excellent stuff. So just to fill in a bit of background, well, we probably need a little bit of biographical background from you, but just to fill in the background for viewers, because this is going out to my channels mainly, so it's on my YouTube, Twitter, and stuff. We met a few weeks ago, basically in Miami, didn't we? Because I was over in Miami for a few days. I went on to the Fresh and Fit podcast, as I have done several times in the past, because I know those guys. I've known those guys for quite a while. And Pixie was there, and also a friend of yours, Erin, was there as well. You two, I think it's fair to say, were sort of cast as the feminists on the panel.
Evil feminist.
The evil feminist, the evil feminists on the panel, and it was a really good show. I thought it was a really spicy show. I mean, you guys came in, you were obviously very well prepared. You had very strong opinions about this stuff. Myron obviously was coming from a different direction. Sneeko was there as well. I was there also, and it was I thought it was a great show, and so that's how we sort of met, and then we were sort of talking behind the scenes, and I'm keen to have more dialogue, certainly with women on this channel, but also with people from I wanted to say different political persuasions, but actually I don't think we're probably that far apart, to be fair, because I'm not as radical as some of the red pill guys that you probably think about, but
Yeah.
Anyway, with all of that being said, did you want to just introduce yourself a little bit? And Pixie, by the way, is a Twitch streamer. She's got her Twitch channel is really firing at the moment. You've got YouTube as well. But did you want to just sort of tell the guys a bit about yourself and your take?
Sure. So I'm Pixie. I'm 23 years old. I graduated from University of Florida with a degree in psychology, economics, and philosophy. I have recently gotten back into Twitch politics, so I'm here just like debating, talking with random people. I think a lot of people have misconceptions about dating and about women and what women really want or what they don't want. So I'm always open to have a conversation about this type of stuff because I do think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we were on Fresh and Fit, and by the way, just before we get into that, you've had quite a lot of positive feedback from Fresh and Fit, haven't you? I think since they went out.
I was extremely surprised. I won't lie. Like I've been, I've gone to other people to debate, and I'm usually bombarded with a bunch of messages like telling me to like kill myself or like telling me all these horrible things. So I thought after Fresh and Fit, I would get that, and I got some of that. But a lot of people were saying, "Oh, even though I disagreed with you, I liked how well spoken you were." Or I thought that you made some good points. So that really caught me off guard. And I was really happy about that because it seems like, okay, even if we have these crazy different perspectives, there does seem to be a certain population that is okay with trying to find a middle ground or listening to another side without wanting to murder them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was glad about that. I mean, as I say, I think having been on a few of those shows, I think the quality of that show was good, largely because of you guys, because you were not to denigrate any of the other women that were there, but you brought a sort of quite robust sort of debating power to the equation. So it wasn't just this slam dunk sort of knockabout thing of basically sort of joking around. There was actually quite a lot of substance there, and I think that was really good. And I'm sure the viewers, appreciated that. So that was really cool. Obviously, from my point of view, obviously viewers of my channel know I'm a dating coach, so I try to help guys predominantly to improve their social skills and to get better in social situations with the opposite sex and so on and so forth, amongst other things. I mean, I write as well. I also, taking it more into the direction of sort of self-improvement, self-development and stuff like that. But there is this sort of component of dating. And it seems to me that modern dating is just very, very fraught. And I think we all know that really. It's just very fraught with difficulties. And I mean, one of the key difficulties I think now is how do you actually meet people, right? Because it seems to me, and I want to get your perspective on this, it seems to me that meeting people in public, that is a man going up to a woman and sort of saying hello and introducing himself, is becoming more and more problematic now in Western culture. And I just wonder what your thoughts were on that and what your take is on this.
Yeah, no, I do think that's extremely true. I think a lot more people, I feel like maybe I don't say it's always been this way, but I feel like a lot of people, more women, are feeling more comfortable talking about how there's certain ways that a lot of men, I dare say the majority of men, approach women in public that are just not okay or make women feel very
Yeah,
uncomfortable. And I feel like it wouldn't be as much of a problem if men actually knew what were the appropriate steps to approach someone in public. But I think the
yeah,
vast majority don't. I think the vast majority think that if they just go up to a woman, if they push hard enough, if they just badger her enough, that she'll eventually give in. And I think that's what's caused a lot of tension and distrust towards men who don't do that either. Because then the woman
yeah,
is thinking in the back of their head, okay, like when is this going to take the turn for the worse? Like it's happened so many times before. So then you end up with, men who don't have game, who just mess up the scene for even men who do have game because there's a level of distrust there because of those previous interactions.
yeah. No, I get that, and without a doubt, there are some interactions that are very, very bad, and I mean that's obviously what we try to dissuade people from doing. We should probably, even before we even get into this properly, though, we should probably back up and talk a little bit about gender, because your gender on your profile is she, they, I think, isn't it? So I know we spoke briefly before we went on air, but how do you where do you sit in terms of gender?
So I think a lot of gender, people try to polarize it a lot. People try to act like, oh, women are from like Venus and men are from Mars. And I
Yeah.
think there are differences, don't get me wrong, but I think people exaggerate it so much. And I think growing up in my personal experience, people have told me so many opposite things. People are like, oh, you're actually kind of manly, like you're like loud and like you talk a lot, whatever. Like those are like manly qualities. And then I have people being like, oh no, you're like a girly girl, like you're super feminine, you're,
Yeah.
super lady. So I just feel like since I've had all these people tell me opposite things of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, I'm just like, okay, just call me what you want. Like
Yeah.
I care a lot more about the quality and content of my character. And I think that goes beyond she, they, he. So if you think I'm, Superman, like I don't care, because at the end of the day, to me, none of those words describe my personhood, if that makes sense. There's more to me
Yeah.
than just my gender.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. And it's just in terms of your background, you're in Florida now, aren't you? I think quite near Miami. But previously, you're actually from Puerto Rico, right?
Yes, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico for 18 years of my life. And then
Wow.
a lot of Puerto Ricans, if they can afford it, because the universities are not very good there for a lot of things, they go to the United States for university. So I
Yeah,
was 2 years in New York studying, and then I moved to Florida.
nice. Did you like New York?
Yes and no. Like there's a lot. New York is just very busy, so there's like a
Yeah,
lot of cool things about it, but it can also get overwhelming sometimes.
yeah. I mean, were you in Manhattan?
I was in the Bronx, so I was like in the worst part of New
Oh,
York as
okay.
well.
Oh, okay, nice. Because I mean, I really like New York. I've not been for quite a few years now, actually. But I think probably, well, I mean, I haven't been to that many American cities, but I think of the American cities, I think it's kind of my favorite because it's got that sort of European feel. It's very walkable, all
Yeah.
of that stuff. So it's kind of cool. Miami, I kind of like now a bit more, just having visited several times and knowing some people there now and stuff. But culturally, how different? Because obviously, Puerto Rico, kind of Latin culture, and then coming to the States. I mean, there again, Miami, of course, very Latin anyway. But I mean, how different culturally is it? Would you say?
When I first came to the United States, I did experience a little bit of culture shock because in Puerto Rico, people are very like warm, friendly, loud.
Yeah.
People are a lot more welcoming. And when I went to the United States, I've only been to Miami a few times, but even then,
Mm.
you feel like there's like this cold stone rigidness that people have. They're not like nearly as like casually touching, or they're not nearly as welcoming or friendly. So I came from a place where it's like very like casual, like women and men like talking to each other, like hanging out with each other, like to
Yeah.
like in the United States, it's like, oh, if you casually like like go like this to a guy or like touch, like that's flirting, like that's, oh my god, now you're
Yeah.
like hitting on them super hard. So it was a little bit shocking in that way.
Well, that's interesting because that's kind of where I wanted to go with it in a way because I've been to Puerto Rico once actually just before I met you, but I've been to a couple of other places like I've been to Colombia, I've been to Mexico as well, and my friends travel quite a lot in South America, and it does seem like the Latin culture is much more sort of open to the kind of thing that we're talking about here, you know, kind of flirtation, people meeting in sort of social daytime situations and stuff. It seems to be reasonably accepted over there, right? And now in the West, and certainly I'm back in London now, and we'll talk about London in a minute, but it feels like in the West, these interactions between men and women has become very politicized now in a way that, I mean, maybe it is, I don't know, you can tell me, but it seems less so in the Latin countries or the Latin culture.
Yeah, because I think in the Latin cultures, because there is so much of more like casual touch between, I think, genders as well, or much more like casual interactions. It's the stakes seem a little bit less high. So, for example, in like in the Western culture, it seems like when somebody touches you, that's like a clear indication that they want something with you. So I think suddenly like everybody's kind of on edge because it's like, what if I want to say no? Or like, what if I'm not sure? Or what if, you know, what if they're not going to respect it? Well, like in Latin cultures, it's just like, okay, it's just part of talking. It's just part of, you know, hanging out with someone. So then if you want to take it further, you know, you'll talk more, you'll hang out more, it'll become something more. But you don't have like these extremely high stakes that you start off with in the West. So I think that maybe has to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I've noticed that actually in the UK, because there's a lot of Latin, you know, people from different countries who are living, say, in London. And sometimes it's the case that they can be like super friendly and super touchy and whatever. And that can then be misconstrued sometimes by, say, a guy, because he thinks, oh, this is a really flirtatious situation. And it kind of isn't. The girl's just like super, I don't know, party or whatever. So it's interesting the way these cultural differences sort of play into it, isn't it? But it does feel like, so why don't we talk about the gym TikToks for a minute? Because that was something that came up in the last sort of couple of weeks, wasn't it? Where a number of these girls have been posting these videos of guys either approaching them in the gym or just looking at them in the gym and sort of saying, oh, this is super creepy. This is not right. And then there's been that other guy, hasn't there? That other content creator who's then been making these call out videos, sort of calling them out and going, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself, do better, because maybe that guy was just lonely or whatever. So that seems to have become a bit of a hot topic just recently. What's your take on all of that?
I think there are some women who are hyper edge or hyper aware because of previous bad experiences. So I understand like there are some videos where it's like, he looked at you for 2 seconds. It's not a big deal. Like that's just how people have eyes, you know, they sometimes look at places. But there's other videos where it's understandable. I'm thinking about one specifically where the man starts touching her to be a spotter without even asking her first. And he defends that video saying he was just trying to help you. But so many women have been in positions of men trying to help them. When reality, it's like the man like trying to like touch them or get with them. So it's like, no, like I think in the gym, everybody's already sweaty. Everybody's like, it's not the most glamorous situation. People usually want to go there to like work out, get their gains and like get out, unless if you're in a social club, which maybe we can talk about in a little bit. And so when you already have this situation that is not the best, people do not feel the most comfortable in, and the bar is really low because all you have to do is ask first, right? Be like, hey, do you want help? Or can I, use your equipment, whatever. And you don't meet that bar, then suddenly like shit explodes. Everybody's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why can't you just ask? So I think that's why women are reacting so strongly.
Yeah, I can understand that as well, because it is kind of annoying, when the super, like, I don't know, experienced gym bro just comes over and starts, I mean, sometimes it's even happened to me in the past, some annoying person will come over and just be like, oh yeah, your form's not quite right there, bro. And it's like, listen, man, I'm listening to music here. I'm just trying to get into my workout. I don't really want to have interaction with other people. So I do get that. And funny enough, actually, gym approaches is something that we get asked about a lot. Guys will often say, well, if there's a cute girl in the gym, how do I approach her? What do I say? Blah, blah, blah. Generally speaking, we've always advised guys not to, particularly if it's a gym that you go to a lot, because obviously you don't want to, it's just not a good look to be that guy who's just going around hitting on people. And also as well, you're there for a purpose, right? You're there to work out. You're there to do something, positive for yourself and so the other people. It's not really an appropriate forum, is it, in general, for like just randomly going and hitting on people?
Yeah, no, it's extremely uncomfortable for I think and that's why when people are talking about like, oh, like how do I meet new people to hit on blah blah blah, what if I want to like do a physical activity and meet someone doing that? It's I think there are avenues. I think a lot of clubs, a lot of gyms have social types of clubs, so like volleyball,
Yeah.
like kickboxing, things that you can do as a group. And I think if that was a situation, it'd be very different because people are more willing to socialize when it comes to those group activities. But if you're alone just lifting weights, then you gotta leave them alone.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I mean, is it always bad? Because if a guy, because I one of the problems with this whole discourse, I feel, is that it feels like, and I'm saying this as my poor, get the violin out, poor sort of white middle class Anglo-Saxon guy. So but it does feel like all guys are somewhat being tarred with a brush of anything the guy does is by definition super creepy and inappropriate and wrong, and that I think is where it starts to get a little bit problematic. I mean, what if a guy, he's a decent guy, he's well put together, he's respectful, he's intelligent, he's got his shit together, and he sees a woman and he thinks she's attractive? Is it always a bad thing for him to just go over and say, hey, listen, I just saw you, I know you're working out, but I just wanted to come and say hello? I mean, is that always a bad thing, or could it ever be acceptable?
I think if you want it to be acceptable, I think men always have to have this like in the back of their mind when they're hitting on someone, is that you have to have a situation where they can easily like escape in a way, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
know that sounds bad, but it's because of all these like negative experiences beforehand. So I think
yeah,
maybe at the end of the trip, like if you see them like heading out, just like a quick like hi, bye, maybe
yeah.
like give them your number quickly and that's it. Because if you're in the middle of the workout or if you're about to start the workout, then it's like, oh fuck, like what am I gonna do? Like if I say
Yeah.
I don't know how they're gonna react if I say no. I don't know how long they're gonna just like keep staring at me throughout the whole time that I'm working out afterwards. Like I don't know what to do. Like suddenly you have all these other complications and variables that are
Yeah.
almost getting in the way of you working out, which was your whole reason why you came there in the first
Well,
place.
yeah, no, totally. And I did see a girl saying somewhere online, maybe it was one of the women who posted one of these TikToks, but she was saying, look, I mean, imagine having to change your whole routine around because there's some creepy dude who's at the gym and he keeps turning up and you're just there to try and work out and you feel that you can't do that. And I do get that. Because again, for the most part, when I'm in a gym or I'm doing something like that, I don't want to be bothered either by people. Not, because not that I'm going to get hit on, but it's just that I want to be in the zone. I just want to be in the zone. I'm usually listening to music, maybe listening to an audiobook or something like that. And it's a bit like I just don't want to have communication with other people. So it is totally understandable. But I have to confess, Pixie, I did the unforgivable and I did do a gym approach. Last summer, and so basically what happened was I was in, because I obviously travel around quite a lot with work, and I was in Warsaw in Poland. We spent quite a long time in Warsaw last summer, and I was in this gym, and obviously then you're going to gyms and you're not you're there for a week or a couple of weeks, but you're not like a regular there. Saw this one girl, she was quite attractive, she was on the the machine or whatever. And I thought, well, she looks nice, but I wouldn't approach in that situation when the person's exercising because that's ridiculous. But a bit later on, I saw her. She was like looking at her phone. She'd just come out of the changing room or something. And I just went over and said, "Oh, hey, listen, I saw you before, working out." And then I immediately transitioned it into something like, I said, "Look, I'm quite new in town. I'm actually looking for some cool restaurants to go to. Is there anything you can recommend?" And the reason I went for that kind of more low-key approach was really to gauge her reaction. Because if she clearly not wanted to talk or not wanted to have a conversation, then I would have just said, okay, fair enough. Well, anyway, nice to meet you. But she was like super open and super friendly. And she was saying, oh, yeah, I know this really cool Italian place. And she was, looking on her phone and giving me the details and everything. And so then we were able to broaden out the conversation a bit. So I was like, well, look, you seem like you've lived here for a while. And she goes, yeah, but I'm actually from somewhere else. And she started telling me about her city and everything. And then, after a couple of minutes, I said, well, look, I've got to get going now, but you seem really cool. Maybe we could exchange numbers and we can talk again on message or whatever. She's like, yeah, sure. So then we exchanged numbers. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing to have done, if that makes sense. But then on the other hand, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do you think that's inappropriate, or do you think that's kind of setting the right tone?
Well, I think you actually played it perfectly. Like, I think,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, you did.
Thumbs up.
This, yeah, I think, especially the way that you approached it, the stakes were super low in a way. At least it seemed for her, right? So you're like, oh, I'm new. I just want to know if there's any cool restaurants. You're not like, oh, can we go on a date? Where suddenly it's like, oh, okay, like now I have to think about like romantic, not romantic, how are they going to respond, blah, blah, blah. It was just like, hey, if you have recommendations, cool. If you want to join me in those recommendations, cool also. If not, whatever, going on my way. So I feel like a lot of men go super hardcore when it comes to hitting on women and just try to lay it on as like thick as possible. And I think that kind of starts like the flight, fight, freeze instinct of like juggling all these possibilities around. I think the fact that you also, at least you said like, okay, like cool, now I gotta go. It seems like you exited the conversation first, which I also think is really good and really positive because I think a lot of guys like kind of linger around and then now suddenly like you're stuck there. So you gave her a quick, like you had a quick chat, you didn't overextend it, you gave her an opportunity to like exit right afterwards. And you didn't start off with like an intense, super hardcore, like, oh, like I want to go on a date with you. You kind of left it open. So I think if there's any way to approach it, you did it right.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm relieved about that. But and as it was, we ended up getting on and we went out and you know, still in contact with her. So that was cool. But I think there's a couple of really key things here. The first thing is, in any sort of public situation like that, you're right, you've got to give them, they've got to know that they can leave at any time, and also that you're not going to monopolize their time for the rest of the day or something, right? They've got to know. And so often what we'll say to guys is say, look, if you're going to approach somebody, say, listen, I've only got a couple of minutes, but I just had to come over and say hello, you know, to indicate that you're not going to be hanging around, because that must be the worst thing. You know, you get some guy coming over and it's like, oh, Jesus, this guy's just going to monopolize me now for the rest of the day.
Yeah, you finally finish the gym, you get out, you're like, I just want to go home and either like shower or lay down if I already showered in the gym locker or whatever. And now suddenly you're trapped in a 2-hour-long conversation with someone you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So there's got to be that. And that is down to the guys, isn't it? Because guys can complain about this stuff and they can say, oh, well, you know, how do we meet women these days and blah, blah, blah. But you've got to have that basic social awareness, haven't you? Because if you don't, then yes, it is going to come across as, well, I suppose creepy, but equally just annoying or even a little bit threatening. I mean, that's the worst thing, isn't it? If it comes over as like, shit, this guy is like, you know, he's just going to just sort of follow me home or something.
Yeah. I feel like I think a lot of guys don't understand how terrifying it could be a woman in those scenarios. Because realistically, if you are, I want to assume the best of people, but the reality is that it seems like almost every woman has at least one bad experience, right? And that's kind of enough to set the tone a lot of times because they don't know you. And women, especially from a young age, are taught to be extra aware of the bad experiences because if something bad happens, then suddenly it's on them for not being aware enough. So it's very stressful.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, have you got any bad experiences you've had? Is there anything you could share or, you know, obviously if you don't feel comfortable, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, not specifically in the gym, but also I don't go to the gym very often. I usually do outside activities. So I like kayaking or other stuff. But in general, like countless times I think about like times I've gone to like bars or outside to hang with my friends. And then a guy who cannot take no for an answer or who cannot take like, oh, sorry, like I'm not interested right now, blah, blah, blah. And it's gotten to a point where I kind of either have to lie and say like, oh, I have a boyfriend, because then suddenly he respects me saying no, basically, if I have like an imaginary boyfriend. Or I have to kind of go away as quickly as possible because it feels like sometimes when I say a straightforward no, they take it as a challenge. They take it as a way to say like, okay, no, I have to like prove her otherwise. Well, there's some guys, honestly, and this is kind of messed up in the society we live in. It feels like if they just accepted that or if they just like kept the chat short, I would be much more interested in them because I'm like, oh, this guy can respect my boundaries, or like this guy, he's not going to try to ignore everything I say to just like, you know, push me into something I'm not comfortable with. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think basically, if somebody says no, if somebody says, "Look, I'm not interested," then you know you want to cut your losses and move on. Really, I mean, I don't think it's just not a good strategy to be trying to sort of argue the point with somebody. And I mean, there's billions of people on this planet as well, right? I mean, if somebody's not interested, they're not interested. I mean, you've got to take that as at face value and sort of move on, really. So I think again, it's like, but do you think a lot of this stuff is like basic social awareness? Maybe some people are just lacking that social awareness of when it crosses the line from being all right to sort of inappropriate.
I think it's a combination of lack of social awareness, but I also think growing up, there's just a lot of media teaching guys that if they like keep pushing forward for the girl, if they just don't stop no matter what, like she'll eventually, you know, fall in love with you and say yes. And that's just not how reality translates. So I think
Yeah.
growing up, when it seems like every guy who is successful with ladies is doing this strategy of nonstop, you know, being the jock, pushing forward, whatever, then you're going to be more inclined to repeat it. And I don't think there's enough men saying like, hey, you know, you got to take the L. There's a billion other people out there. You know, you don't want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with you anyways. That just sounds miserable.
Well, it's interesting actually because there's a guy. I don't know if you know Dr. Robert Glover. He wrote the book "No More Mr. Nice Guy," which is quite a famous, book that a lot of guys in the male self-help space read. But he's got another book which is called "Dating Essentials for Men," which I read about a year or so ago, and it was quite interesting. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. I mean, there's nothing kind of groundbreaking in it, except there's one idea in it which really resonated with me, which is basically, he said, you want to go out and just be as social as possible in all different kinds of situations and look for signals of high interest versus low interest. And what his argument, which I think is you could contest somewhat, but just for the sake of laying it out there, his argument is basically, as far as women are concerned, you've either got high interest or you've got low interest. So if she says, I mean, the classic, I've got a boyfriend or something, that is an indicator of low interest. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's not true. It's not an invitation to try and, talk around or sort of say, oh, yeah, but, does your boyfriend know where does your boyfriend live? Oh, he's in Arizona. Okay, well, the cat's away. It's not an invitation for that. It's just, okay, that's low interest. I'm going to move on. Now, and then you're going to meet somebody else, and she's immediately sort of open to you having that conversation, and she's happy to chat with you and joke around with you, whatever. And that's high interest. Okay, right. This is one that maybe we can advance forward. I mean, do you think that kind of is a good way of looking at this?
I think there is truth to that there are certain indicators where it's just you have to like leave her alone. I think it just really depends on where you're at. I mean, but not with a sentence of like, oh, I have a boyfriend. I feel like that's pretty clear. But I feel like I'm trying to think how to phrase this. I think a lot of women don't know exactly what they want out of you, if anything, when they first meet you, right?
Right.
So they're not sure, like, oh, friendship ? Just more sexually, romantically, maybe because they don't really know you. They don't know anything about you whatsoever. Continue.
Yeah. So that's interesting because that then, and as I said, I think the Dr. Robert Glover model can be questioned somewhat because I think there is that middle ground, isn't there? There is that middle ground. And actually, we're talking about game per se. I forget who it was. It might have been, I forget who it was who said this, but basically there's this idea of you've got either women who just are definitely not interested in you. Whatever you do, she's just never going to be interested. Okay, fine. And then you've got women who, for whatever reason, they just really like you. You're just her type. She just fancies you. She thinks you're hot, whatever. So you've got that. But then in the middle, you've got this group of women in the middle who are sort of like, yeah, okay, it's not a definite no, but I don't know yet. And there was this idea that game, if you want to call it that, is played on the women sort of in the middle, where if you do certain things or if you present yourself in a certain way, maybe she'll go more into the yes direction than the no direction. So maybe that's where the problem arises, because guys sort of intuitively perhaps sense that, but they're either misinterpreting a definite no for a maybe, or they mess it up somehow, and then they just keep pushing when they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think a lot of people interpret like potential yes is an absolute yes. And then that kind of also makes things go downhill. I think it makes sense intuitively because women are socialized from a young age to be aware about how men can be like a threat or not, or how you have to be careful about that. It makes sense that the second they meet you, or like even like one conversation in, that's not enough for them to have an absolute yes or absolute no. And I think a lot of guys are impatient. I think it makes sense, right? It all depends if you're actually looking to be with someone or if you're just looking to have like sex quickly, right? So this also like influences everything. But I think a lot of women, when you're first getting to know them, it's going to take quite a bit. And it's frustrating because you don't want to waste your time with somebody who ends up saying no. But you're also alienating a lot of people who might potentially say yes by jumping the gun too quickly. So it's just, I think it's frustrating. I think everybody loses a little bit just in the time game because it's like nobody wants to waste time, but sometimes it does take time to get what you want.
Well, do you mean over the course of like a few dates or a few meetings or something like that, as opposed to, so it may take a while to sort of, you know, for the woman to sort of warm to you sufficiently to sort of take things further.
Yeah, I think because like, you know, the first date, unless if you're really bad, like most people are going to try their hardest to make their best impression on the first date. And then like second or third date, people start letting down their guard a little bit. They start showing a little bit of like more like imperfections, or you learn more about the person's character. And obviously this isn't a 100%, like this is how it's always going to go. But maybe like, you know, 1 or 2 weeks in or whatever, or a little bit more, maybe like fourth date, depending on how you schedule all of this. I think the woman becomes a lot more comfortable like opening up because there has to be a level of consistent interaction where you show that you're stable, that you're not just a completely different person from date 1 to date 3, that you show that your values have stayed consistent, that make a woman a lot more comfortable opening up to you or being with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, in terms of dates, I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with a guy sort of making his intentions known on the first date. I mean, he's attracted to her. I'm not saying to push super hard or anything, but I think it's okay for him to, you know, to sort of own the fact that he's attracted to her. But at the same time, you know, in terms of if we're talking about getting intimate, it's going to take, obviously, with different women, depending on the situation, it's going to take different amounts of time. And I think guys have, you know, obviously you go at the speed that the woman wants to go. And so, you know, I think it's, I don't know, really. For me, I think it's a balance between sort of acknowledging and holding the fact that you are attracted to her and this is a man to woman situation, as opposed to a sort of a platonic friendship kind of thing. Because I think guys can sometimes, through ego defense, sort of almost hide away from the fact that actually he's attracted to her, to save himself from that rejection. So I think there's an element of sort of owning that in the interaction and expressing that in some way, but also being very respectful of her boundaries and the speed at which she wants to take things.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys go from one extreme to the other extreme. I feel like, you know, if you're on a date with a woman, like obviously she wants to feel like you're attracted to her, hence the date. But there's a difference between that and then going full like, oh, this is like what I want from you. Like she wants to feel like a human too. She wants you to feel like you are attracted to her physically and attracted to her like emotionally or at some level of being, than just pure physicality.
What do you think the main mistakes that guys make then out there in the dating world? Maybe in your experience or just what you've observed around generally?
I think a lot of guys get frustrated because they're not getting laid or they're not like being able to get these relationships. So I think I think a lot of them start looking at the wrong places, or they conflate getting laid with a relationship. So for example, it annoys me a lot when I go to like these like red pill like Fresh and Fit or whatever, for example, and they're talking about like, oh, women just care about like money and status. And I don't want to say women don't care about that. But there's definitely women who care more than just that, you know, I'm going to use myself as an example. Like I've had multiple guys who have like tried to hit on me and like they're flashing their nice watch or they're talking about their like private island or private, And then it's like, that's not that's cool. But also I come from like a special, I'm very fortunate and lucky that my parents can afford like stability for me, right?
Yeah.
But for women who are like me, I'm gonna look at that and I'm gonna be like, okay, cool. What about you? What is there about you? Well, if you're like a gold digger, like that's gonna be enough for you because you see they got the money, you want to get that bag as quickly as you can. That's gonna be enough for them to sleep with you. But then if you want like a true relationship, you have to go to places where you basically signal that you have similar values to the women or men there.
Yeah.
So for example, if you value like creativity, you should pick up a hobby. You should go to pottery classes or something. And there you're going to meet other creative types. You're going to meet other people who have that value. And then you can form a relationship from those same or similar set of values than from like completely out of the blue.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the gold digger thing gets a little bit overplayed in the red pill space, to be honest, because I'm trying to think in my quite lengthy sort of dating history. I can't really think of. I mean, maybe it's just because I haven't got Justin Wallace type money, but I can't really think of any occasions when I've met like a full-on gold digger in the way that people describe it on the internet. I think for the most part, and as well. I mean, I've travelled, in countries that are less well off, let's say, than the UK, and I've met women from those sort of backgrounds, and even then, it hasn't been. I've never really seen any suggestion of that, really. I think for the most part, people want to get on with their lives. I think, and this is another thing, guys, I think have this misconception that if you travel to a country that was economically, less advanced than your own country, you've got these women and they just want to get money off you and they just want to, I don't know, sort of jump on your bandwagon. And I don't actually think that's true either. I mean, it probably is true in some instances, but I think a lot of women in those countries, like guys as well, they just want to get on with their life. They've got their own life in that country. They want to do their thing. They want to go to university. They want to get a job or whatever. They don't just want to sort of randomly go off with some dude just because he's from New York and he's got a Rolex. So I do think it gets massively overplayed. I'm sure there are plenty of women out there who are like that, but I don't think it's as common as people think.
Yeah, I think I think the people who go into the mentality that that's what women want, I think the type of women who are actually like that, they find each other very quickly.
Yeah. People are going to say I'm simping now because I'm saying this to you, but it's genuinely, that's just genuinely my experience. But the other thing about it as well, I would say, is I think that I probably screen out women who I think are going to be like that very quickly anyway. Do you know what I mean? Because if I meet somebody, if it's on a dating app or in wherever it is, and she's like, oh, where are we going for dinner? Or, oh, I like that new, Hermes handbag or whatever. I'm just not going to continue with that interaction because that's not what I'm about, if that makes sense,
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that's why I think a lot of the red pilling stuff is kind of self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit. Because if you believe that the vast majority of women are like this, again, for example, that's not something I value. So if I see a guy like trying to like flex his money on me, I'm gonna think, okay, like he's kind of shallow. Like I don't really think I have the same values as him. This is probably not gonna lead anywhere. Like I'm not gonna really be interested in it. I think women who care more about quality or content of a man's character, and I'm not saying there's like financial stability out of the window, because I think everybody wants a level of financial stability. But if that's all a guy has, like, congratulations. Like, I don't need that. I need somebody who will add something more to my life than just a dollar bill.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is as well, we've taught guys who are very wealthy. I mean, I've had students, clients, people I've worked with who are multi-millionaires, particularly guys who made a lot of money in things like crypto or some sort of trading or the tech industry, things like that. Meet these guys who are multi-millionaires, and yet their dating lives suck. So again, this perception, and I think maybe we can talk a bit about the looks, money, status kind of paradigm that's out there on the internet. But I think this idea that, oh, if you've got money, I mean, I get it in my comments sometimes. People just say, I if I do a video saying what do women look for or something, and somebody underneath writes easy money, but it just doesn't it doesn't play out like that in the real world, not from what I've seen anyway, because I've seen guys who are very wealthy who just are not getting traction in dating. So if it was just money, then surely those guys would be, sort of, I don't know, just not having an issue.
Yeah, I think what people co-inflate or don't realize is that or the unfortunate reality is that most of the time when somebody has a lot of money, that gives them the opportunity to dress nicely. It gives them the opportunity to travel, become well cultured, learn a bunch of interesting new things. And I think women are attracted to like all these like secondary qualities. I don't really know. I wouldn't consider them secondary, but extra qualities that money can oftentimes afford. But if you just have money and you're still like dressing like a slob, so you're not really taking care of yourself. It doesn't look like you're taking good care of your hygiene. I don't want to date somebody that I'm parenting. I want to date somebody who's my partner, who's equal. And you have no extra hobbies. You don't really have anything interesting going on in your life. Okay, that's going to detract a lot of women. So I think people think, you see, like money, that means that she wants him. But it's like, no, like it just happens to be the unfortunate reality that if you have money, you can afford to do all these other things that also attract women. But that's not the money in itself.
No, I agree. I think that's absolutely right. And actually, I was talking to somebody, quite a well-known content creator who's wealthy, and he was saying the same thing. It's not the money per se. It's the fact that you can do this cool stuff with the money. So if you're able to say, hey, let's just take a trip to the south of France for a few days, or let's go and do this or do that, obviously that is attractive. But it's the lifestyle as opposed to the money. I mean, again, I'm sure there's a very small contingent of women who are just out and out ruthless gold diggers. And it is literally, I want to find a husband who's worth, however many millions so that I can, I don't know, have this kind of life. But I do think that they're in the minority. I don't think that the average guy is really going to come across those women. At all. What about, while we're on this sort of topic, what about, have you talked about the black pill? You did a black pill stream, didn't you? Have you talked to black pill guys? These guys who their whole idea is that it's only about looks. And if you're not good looking, then that's it. The kind of the incel mythology. Have you encountered that?
Yeah, I've talked to a few. And there's a lot to unpack there. But I think the gist of it is, if you have this mindset that this is like the only thing that women care about, the women who get that vibe from you, sense of you, like, why would I want to talk to a guy who assumes the worst of me every time I talk to them? Like, why would I want to date a guy that I have to like constantly prove myself that I'm not like the other Stacys who only care about looks? That's exhausting. I'd rather just hang out with a guy who doesn't think that way about me. So it really is a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, because any person who doesn't think like that is going to be detracted. Well, if you do think like that, you're like, oh, he has a point, whatever. Like, that's just how women are. And you're not detracted because you actually think that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole deep rabbit well, really, all of that. Sorry, rabbit hole, all of that stuff. But no, there is this idea that the only things that count are looks, money, and status. Looks for the black pill guys, looks is the most important. It's basically, right, if your jaw measurements aren't precisely this, then you're never going to get laid and you're going to die alone. But there are other people who are a bit more sort of open about it, and they'll say, no, well, money plays a part as well, and status plays a part. If you're, I don't know, the and this does bear out in some reality, doesn't it? If you're like the head of the football team or whatever, you're going to get more attention, you're going to get more women. But these people say that those three things are the only things, and if you don't have those, then you're just going to get no traction at all. Now, for me personally, you walk out the house and you see plenty of couples where it doesn't seem like those factors are really coming into play. So none of this stuff really passes the reality test, but it does seem very real to these people on the internet, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of these men, I don't want to say their standards are too high, because it really feels like it's a constant pendulum where they either have really high standards or no standards at all. So it's really strange. But it seems like a lot of these guys are expecting to have like Instagram models or, people who are, extremely like wealthy and good looking, and they want access to that. And to me, then it becomes the question of like, do you even want these women, or do you want like the status that these women bring, or like the lifestyle as well that these women appear to give? So it just seems like a lot of these men aren't even interested in finding like a true partner, who, you know, might not be the most attractive, but they're not ugly either. They're just not an Instagram model, you know?
Yeah.
And that they're a lot more focused about trying to like reach that lifestyle through trying to attract those types of women. And it's very strange to me.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I think people have got to set their expectations right and probably figure out what they want as well. But I mean, I don't know. A lot of guys that come say to me or they approach our, you know, content, a lot of what many guys seem to want actually is just to find a nice girlfriend. You know, there's this sort of mythology that they want to be these perpetual players and they want to be sort of on a yacht and, you know, with 16 women and drinking champagne and stuff. And for the most part, the guys I deal with, they tend not to actually want that. They tend to they're actually quite conventional. They tend to want relationships, which is sort of not strange, but maybe not quite what I would have expected. But yeah, so you're saying that guys need to really right size their expectations, do you think, and think about what they're actually looking for?
I think a lot of them, basically you have to figure out if you want sex or a relationship, because there is ways to get sex more directly. For example, what we were talking about before, like finding the worst common denominator, kind of finding like those extreme gold diggers by signaling your wealth extremely. But if you want a relationship, it's a completely different game, because if you want somebody who actually like cares about you, stays with you, is willing to talk about like your problems with you, do all sorts of things with you, well, then that's a completely different mentality. You can't just like focus on physicality, because that only takes you so far. And this is going to sound really bad, but like, also, this is kind of random, but also people's character, at least for me, and I think for a lot of women as well, like does impact how physically attractive they are. Like a guy can be like a 7 or something, but if he's constantly making you laugh, if he's constantly like, you know, helping me like show like really cool things, well, suddenly like I blink and the next thing I know, he's like a 9 to me, because wow, like
that's not true. You've got all the black pill trolls are like seething now. No, she's lying. If he's not 6'7" and he's got abs of steel, then he can't be a 9.
And it's like, no, like literally, if you are able to improve somebody's quality of life to like a like significant amount, or amount that's noticeable, like you become more attractive. I don't know how other way to put it.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case, and it works both ways actually as well, because even though men get the charge that gets leveled against men, which is somewhat true, is that men are very visual and it's only about looks for men. That is somewhat true, but even for men, in my experience, getting to know somebody, getting to see their personality, people can really grow on you. You know, maybe you meet a woman and at first you're like, yeah, she's kind of she's cute, she's nice, and then you spend a bit of time together, you're like, actually, wait a minute, she's really, she's amazing, she's brilliant, and that I've certainly experienced that in the past. So. Of course, it must make a difference. The way that we perceive somebody's looks is about much more than just their physicality.
Yeah, I feel like if people were really just into aesthetics, like you would basically be saying that like this sounds kind of vulgar, but like a nice blow-up doll, like or an attractive one, would basically be enough to be in a relationship with, or that would be enough. But obviously, no. Like people want experiences with another person, not just.
Well, you're saying that, but that's where it's all going now, isn't it? It's these AI girlfriends that people are talking about. It's going to be in 10 years' time. It's going to be AI girlfriends, rubber dolls, and I don't know.
But even then, I feel like the reason why the AI is such a level of improvement is because they're able to provide you like this experience of talking to someone, of like having a conversation with them, and them still being interested in you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just wanted to take it back a little bit to this thing about meeting people and so on, though, because the thing that I find really dystopian and quite disheartening is the thought that the only way that it's going to become acceptable to sort of meet people in a few years' time, or maybe even now, is via dating apps, because it does feel a bit like, and maybe this is more the case even in the UK than it is in the States. But I mean, so in London, a few things have happened recently. So every time I've returned to London, there's posters on the subway basically saying things like, there was a poster last summer saying touching someone inappropriately is bad, you shouldn't do it. Obviously, yes, we're all agreed with that. But then there was another poster famously that said staring at somebody is a form of sexual assault.
Jesus.
And it, you know, and guys were sort of saying, well, hang on a minute, because, you know, like, what if you're just like half awake in the morning and you're like looking at somebody, and then, you know, they call the police and you get arrested. It feels like the whole culture, and maybe this is a UK thing, but I think it's happening in other places as well. It feels like the whole culture is sort of moving against. I mean, it's rightly taking up the baton for women's rights, and for women's right not to be, you know, assaulted or maltreated, but it's ratcheting it up to such a degree that it's almost going to make guys approaching women in real life become almost illegal, or at least something that's very risky for them to do. And there's also, actually, I read a couple of articles recently about in UK schools, there's been a number of you know, accusations leveled against male pupils for sort of being inappropriate. I think there's a website in the UK that people can anonymously write about, saying, oh, this guy, you know, he we were on the break together and he tried to kiss me or something like that. And lots of guys, lots of young, you know, kids, like young male school kids, basically, have been really traumatized by this, because they've been accused of inappropriate sort of behavior, which, you know, some of it maybe it was inappropriate, others of it may be more innocent. But it seems like this sort of like interplay between men and women is becoming more and more frauds, if that makes sense. And I do worry that we're going to get to a position where, in the end, the only acceptable way to meet somebody of the opposite gender, maybe even the same gender, but, you know, for a guy to meet a girl, is going to be via a dating app. Do you think that that's the future?
I hope it's not. I think I really do not like dating apps. I think a lot of it is by design, is like kind of superficial, and they're a little bit incentivized to even trying to not have you actually find someone, because then you'll stop using the dating app.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, a friend of mine says, imagine outsourcing your romantic and, you know, sexual life to a corporation. I mean, that's effectively what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's kind of terrifying. I think there's two things that have to change. I think we have to find, when it comes like finding a partner or something, we have to focus more on meeting people who will have similar values to us in similar spaces, right? So if you value helping other people out, just focus on trying to live your truest self in that way, right? Your truest sense of like, oh, like, I'm going to do community service, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think like eventually you will meet someone who has the similar values as you and is attracted to you because of who you are in that way, and in what way you're occupying this world. And then that could become something. But do not do it just for the sake of getting girls. Do it because you actually like it, and you'll attract people who like that as well. I also think our culture has to become, or maybe this is just my bias, my Hispanic bias. I think we have to be more comfortable with physical touch. And this is going to sound really strange, and I don't want to just like blame it all on men, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think I'm thinking about the United States. I'm thinking about some guys that are touchy-feely, but where it's not a problem. And my mind always goes to Hispanic guys who are just as comfortable touching men as they are women. Because then suddenly, like, you're not thinking, when they're touching you, you're not thinking like, oh my God, is he trying to like hit on me? Is this like special or whatever? Because you see him also like hugging the other dude. You see him like, you know, casually like going like this. So you think, no, he's just like this with everybody. Like, it's not a special thing. So I feel like if we have a culture that is much better with just like casual touch, and like with both men and women, you can't just focus it on just women. It has to be everybody. I think the stakes get lowered. But that's difficult. I don't know. I'm not part of UK culture, so I can't say how easy or hard that would be.
Well, no, that's fair enough, because you're not. UK culture is famously, you know, we're all meant to wear bowler hats and be very, you know, and we're not tactile in the way that, you know, say somebody from a Latin culture is tactile. I'm more tactile personally, and you know, in social situations generally, not just with women. But I think that's because I've learned to be like that over time, and you know, it now sort of fits very well with my personality. And obviously there are other British people who are, but yeah, you're right. I suppose we are a somewhat uptight sort of nation. But I mean, I saw Myron. I think I can't remember if it's the show that you were on or a different show, but Myron was saying apparently in Canada as well, it's now been, I don't know the legality of this, so people will have to check, but approaching a woman in public has now been made illegal. So I don't think it's just Britain. I think it's happening in Britain, but I think probably some states in the US as well. The sort of behavior of going up to somebody and expressing attraction for them in public would be seen to be problematic. Like maybe in California, for example, I don't know. I was in LA recently. Maybe in parts of LA, doing that would be seen by some people to be like, "Oh, why is this guy being so creepy?" And that's, I can understand why that might be the case, but maybe I'm just catastrophizing. But I think the danger is that we get into a situation where guys are too afraid to approach, and then we're in this sort of digital dystopia where we can only meet each other online.
Yeah. I would have to look at like those states or specific laws to be able to like form a full judgment, because I do think it is creepy or wrong if a guy just comes up to me and is like, "I want to have sex with you like right now."
Yeah.
Then it's like, what the fuck? Like, I don't even fucking know you. What are you doing? But just approaching someone, I would agree. Like, no, like people talk to each other. That's how humanity is. We're social creatures. We like having conversations with one another. And I think it's like kind of weird to put like women in like this very like strange pedestal of like you're not even allowed to like speak to one casually. Like I completely disagree with that. So it's difficult for me to say until I look at that law about like how reasonable.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I mean, look, I mean, so there was I mean, it's quite a dark subject area, but there's been some issues in say the UK recently. So I mean, tragic incident about 2 years ago. A woman was murdered by an off-duty policeman, and this was sort of during the during the pandemic period, because there was lockdown. Lockdown was still happening. I mean, obviously lockdown, various graduations, but lockdown was going on. But a group of women and sympathetic men got together to do a protest in one of the parks here, and the police sort of allowed it to go ahead and everything. And there was obviously a lot of very, very bad feeling about this incident, rightly so, because it was a terrible incident. But that's now seemed to lead the discourse on to people saying, well, we've got to be very careful about male behavior, because male behavior, if it's not checked, can lead to tragic incidents like this. And that I find difficult, because it's implying, I'm sure this isn't their intention, but the sort of underlying implication is that all men are potentially a violent criminal, which is not the case. You know what I'm saying? It's not like there's this continuum where you start off by chatting up a girl innocently in a park, and then you become like something terrible here. It's just not the case. So my fear is that sort of, and this is something the Red Pill talks about a lot, male behavior in general is becoming sort of proscribed, like male behavior in general is being seen now as a threat, when really it in most cases it isn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is kind of interesting because this is a problem I take with the Red Pill as well, or at least the Red Pill people I've talked to, right? I know it's like a giant online community. Because I don't think men are inherently predators. I don't think men are inherently these like creatures that want to like harm women. I think that's very insulting towards men. And that's why I think when I hear like these red pillers talk about like, oh, like men just want to like basically fuck everything that's young, because that's the impression I've gotten talking to a lot of these people. I think that's like very insulting towards men, because you're basically saying that men are inherently like these sexual creatures that don't care about anything but sex, and then that's going to bleed into like how they interact in day-to-day life. When I think like, no, like some men are like that, but I think the vast majority of men are capable to talking to a woman and seeing her as a human being, or finding value in a woman, maybe like not romantically, but still valuing them as a person because of who they are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do believe, I'm not just saying this for teen men, but I do believe the vast majority of men are incredibly respectful towards women, really. I mean, and I don't want to make this too UK centric, because I'm aware you're not aware of these cases, and also this isn't really about the UK, because obviously we've seen in America like the Me Too movement and everything else. So it's I feel like it's part of that general sort of. I suppose you might regard it as being the balance being redressed between where women's sort of rights and men, but. There was this TV program recently in the UK I saw, and this girl, this female journalist, went went for a night out in London and also another one of the cities, and she had secret cameras filming her to see what happens for a woman when she's on a night out, and she was pretending to be drunk, and she was walking around. It wasn't in London; I think it was in Birmingham or something. But she was wandering around this kind of busy area. People are out drinking and stuff, and sure enough, she's pretending to be drunk, and this guy starts hitting on her. He's like, "Hey, babe, where are you going? Where are you going?" She's slurring, saying, "Oh, I'm going home. I'm going home." She starts walking down the street, and then the guy's like following her. He's like, "Oh, baby, am I coming with you? Am I coming?" And all this kind of sort of ridiculous stuff. And then until in the end, she went into her hotel, and he sort of followed her into the hotel and went into the room. And then she broke character, and she was like, "Well, what the hell are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, we went together." And she said, "No, we, I never asked you to come back and everything." Now, obviously, that behavior is appalling. And that guy shouldn't. I mean, it's just like no civilized person would think that was an acceptable thing to do. The guy was obviously a scumbag. But the difficulty is, as a guy sitting there watching this, is you feel a bit like, well, I'm being sort of tarred with that same brush, if you got the expression. Like I'm being put in the same category as someone who would do that, even though I would never do something like that.
Yeah. I think I understand like the feelings of like being like, but maybe I'm a little bit too callous when it comes to this, because I'm thinking like, I process things similarly when I hear somebody say like, "Oh, I hate lawyers. Like lawyers suck." And it's a generalization, but or even like, oh, like Americans suck, whatever. I'm Puerto Rican, so maybe it's a little bit separate or different for me because we have our own little thing going on. But I think like obviously, if this person is referring to all Americans, all Puerto Ricans, all lawyers, if they're actually referring to every single one, right? Well, then they can fuck off. Like, why would I take them like seriously? But if they don't seem the type of person to just actually mean everyone, I would just assume that they're not talking about me. But I understand. I think our culture, and I think online, we have to foster a better culture of how do we speak about generalities. Because I do think it becomes polarizing. I do think when you're not careful and you just like say men or women in general, it does lead to like that reaction and that feeling, because you're just thinking like, okay, well, where's the distinction? There is no nuance. You essentially eliminate nuance when you generalize. So I definitely see where you're coming from. So yeah, I don't be like, I see both sides, but yeah.
But you might be as a feminist, and somebody who's, I heard you describe yourself as a progressive the other day. So somebody coming from that sort of context, you perhaps you see that. I'm putting words in your mouth. Perhaps you see this though as, men have been sort of predominant for a long time. Women have been disadvantaged. Obviously, you said earlier, many women, including yourself, have had bad experiences with guys. This is just the redressing the balance.
I think yes, but I also think that it's not all men. I don't think it's all men. I think it's too many men, and I think it's too many men that stay silent. So this is just random numbers, right? Like this doesn't really mean anything. But let's say like 33% of men or something, or 30 percentile, like do this stuff. Like they're just being like really shitty or whatever. And then like maybe 40% of men just don't say anything when they see this, or like, it's not my business. Like I shouldn't get involved. I don't really know what's like going on, or like, it's not that big of a deal, whatever, like brush it aside. Like, and I think that's most people in general, when they see something bad. I think like women, when they see something bad happening, a lot of them stay quiet too. But yeah, let's say 40% of men just like don't really say anything, don't want to get involved. And then it's like 20% of men, let's see, like 40, 30, like, yeah, like 20% men actually say something. Actually, like, this is fucked up. Get the fuck away. Like, don't do this. Like, this is bad. Yeah. So I think when you have so many men who are silent or who don't want to get involved, it's a lot easier to lump them with like the bad perpetrator, because you're just seeing them like as an accessory to what's happening. And we can have a conversation of whether this is how people should view this situation or not. But I really do think if more men were just like calling out their friends who did this, or, we're willing to get involved in public more when they see something messed up like this happening, I do think you would see a perception shift, instead of just like oh my God, like, is this guy part of the creepy ones or part of not? Because you would literally see all men, or the vast majority of men, as being ones who are actually like willing to help stand up for women.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, you should advise government policy in the UK, because that's actually the tack that they're taking. Because there's now posters up saying, if you see what they're calling, if you see harassment, step in, and they're actually giving instructions saying, oh, you could ask a question to kind of divert the person, or you could call it out, or you could do this or that. So actually, that what you've just described, that is actually the direction they're going in. They're trying to make it a sort of they're trying to encourage other guys actually to call out what they see as bad behavior in public spaces. Which and look, I mean, here's the thing, right? All of this stuff is really laudable, okay? Because we don't want women to be being abused in anywhere, but in public or whatever, right? I mean, we don't want women being harassed. The only slight fly in the ointment with this stuff is that there is a degree of ambiguity, because if somebody goes up to a woman and says, clumsily sort of hits on her, but he doesn't mean any harm, that could then be interpreted by her as harassment, and that guy could then potentially get into trouble when actually his intent was good. I mean, do you think there's a danger of that kind of thing starting to happen?
To me, this is like very situation specific, because there are times where people have the goodest of intentions, but it doesn't necessarily make the consequence of their actions less bad. So, for example, like you could have the best intention on hitting a woman, but if you're like blocking all her exits, and if you're like taking over her space, then like it doesn't matter how good your intention was. You put her in a really uncomfortable situation, and she does have a right to express that. But I do understand, like, there can definitely be gray areas where women can be overreactionary. So, for example, if you're just like talking to a woman, there's a space open for her to leave. And maybe you come on like a little bit too strong. Maybe you're like, oh, like you should really give me your number or something, instead of you giving her your number. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then that's something that can be a gray area that people can overreact to. I do think the reason why I keep emphasizing like more men standing up to the situation is because if there was like less gray area in that sense, if you were in a room with like 10 men and you feel like 8 of them will stand up to you and like help you if one of the 2 men start acting creepy, you stop assuming the worst, or you stop assuming a lot worse things from men in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's fair. That's fair. You're right. I mean, your intention is less important than the action. You're right. And if somebody's actions are hurtful in some way, then that is obviously bad, regardless of if they happen to be actually a really nice guy underneath or whatever. I just, I mean, and as you say as well, I mean, all this stuff is very case specific. I think we're actually, I think there's a lot of hysteria online about this kind of thing, and also in the wake of Me Too as well. This idea that, oh, if you're a guy, you're just going to get arrested if you go and talk to a woman, and I think we're a long way off from that in any of these countries. But I think that there needs to be a space for authentic, spontaneous, and natural interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. People. Yeah, and also I think this might be a controversial take for feminists as well. I do think that there has to be some level of acceptable mistakes or understanding. Because especially when you're younger and you're learning about how to do all of this properly, or you're like, getting away from like the parents' nest, whatever, completely new environment. Obviously, you're not going to be perfect at hitting on people or talking to people, even in general. So I do think there has to be a level of understanding. I think we're in this phase where we're trying to like find out exactly where that is. And it's so hard because it's so case specific. So it's really unclear.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been a major shift though, hasn't there, over the last, I don't know, what is it, 10 years, 15 years or something. I mean, and the way that men were allowed to sort of interact with women in the past is now being called out, isn't it? Very, and from the likes of Harvey Weinstein onwards, and obviously overall that's a positive thing. But I don't know really. I mean, is it like, I don't even know what the question is really. I mean, how do you feel about this? Do you feel like this is long overdue and we're moving in the right direction? Or I mean, it seems to me from talking to you that you can see that there could be some teething problems as we're in this transitional period of figuring out how we relate to one another.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think there are going to be like little like growing spurts, growing pains. But I do think generally it's the right direction, and not just the right direction for women. I think it's the right direction for men too. I think guys in general, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think guys in general want to be with women who want to be with them, and like don't actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I think most men don't actually want to like pressure women. They're just taught like these strategies that are pressuring in nature, instead of being taught like proper strategies. So I think the direction we're moving forward is going to be beneficial for both, because it's going to have women who are like actually like enthusiastic to be with you, and it's also going to have men who don't feel like they have like this giant pressure of how to, I don't say coerce, I don't know what the right word is, I don't want to say force either, but like this giant pressure of just constantly nonstop pushing to finally get one woman with them.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, like I say, I mean, I'll go back to the thing before. I think while there is a grey area, I think overall, if you're looking for, okay, are there signs of high interest here versus low interest? And if you're getting lukewarm, sort of low interest signs, it's probably the right thing for you to cut your losses and move on. You know, in many cases, I mean, so sometimes it's there's a little, she might sort of be slightly dismissive, but there's a little twinkle in her eye or something like that, and you think, okay, well maybe there's the possibility of something, so you might stay talking to her for just slightly longer. But I suppose all this comes down to social calibration, though, and I think one of the problems that we face as a society generally is that people are becoming less socially calibrated because we're all sitting at home watching TikTok. We're not even out talking to each other anyway. So that must make it this interaction between the sexes even harder.
Yeah. Before I forget, there's also a really important point when it comes to like low interest or high interest. I've noticed like I think very few women actually play hard to get. In the sense of like, oh, I'm actually really interested in this guy, but I'm not going to show any signs. Like, I think that's like kind of rare. I think most women, when they like a guy, I don't think they initiate, but I think if you ask them questions like that indicate basically where they have to give an indicator of like yes, they're more likely to say yes than no if they're into you, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of women are afraid to say no because of the like experiences I've said before, and I think that's something that women have to own up to more and try their best at. I think a lot of women are afraid of saying no because like they're afraid of also violent reactions, which I've had people like try to like grab me afterwards. But anyways, that's an aside. But the reason why I bring this up is that I feel like if there's ways for you to ask questions that force a woman to like engage or show engagement, that I think that's going to make things a lot more clear. So for example, like when it comes to like sexual topics, like if you're like, oh, like, do you want to have sex? Or like if you say it like in a sexy, whatever, like chances are if she wants it, she'll say yes. But if she doesn't want it, she'll be like, I'm not sure. Like maybe like I have to think about it more. So I feel like guys should focus more on getting answers that focus on some sort of yes or approval or, her showing more interest.
Yeah, no, 100%, I agree. I think my overall take on this stuff is it's okay for you to go and take your shot. If you see somebody that's attractive and the situation's appropriate, it's okay for you to go and, introduce yourself in a respectful way and take your shot. But if it's clearly, I know there's some ambiguity around clearly, but if you do that and she is not enthusiastic or she doesn't appear to be particularly amenable to you talking to her, then you have to cut your losses and go and just move on to the next person, because as we've said, I mean, there's billions of people out there, so it's not as if we have a shortage of human beings here to interact with. I kind of think that's where I sit with it, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think we're both on the same page. I think a lot of men like get too focused on one woman and then idealize her and then think that they have to push forward, when in reality, like, no, there's a lot of people out there.
There really is. So look, we've been on for about it's about an hour and 15. So if anyone's got any questions for Pixie or for myself just about this general topic, please put them into the chat and we'll deal with them. But I suppose just a couple of more general things. I mean, so would you say, as a feminist, Puerto Rican society, where's feminism over there at the moment?
Oh, okay. So it's kind of complicated because, a lot of Hispanic culture has like machismo in it. So they do have like, like male focus, like male, I don't say superiority, but very male focused. I think it's so weird. It's so weird. The reason why I say that is because I think women there's this, my grandma once told me, like, oh, men are the head, but women are the neck, and women decide where the head goes, right? But she was like a very traditional, like Catholic Hispanic, like the man has to sit on the head of the table, like he has to like do all this stuff, and the woman has to just like be like more subservient to him. So when it comes to like, oh, like where's Puerto Rican society going with feminism, I think women are becoming more comfortable like stepping up to themselves more and like standing up to like guys that they think are like fucked up. But I do think there is like a lot of women who still take a lot of their self-esteem from like men approval, or from like trying to get like guys to agree with them, basically.
Right. Yeah. That's why I was interested in the sort of cultural difference, because in the States, I would have thought, I imagine feminism is more advanced, say where you are now, than perhaps where, that in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. And how do you feel? I see you've been doing some stuff with Red Pill content creators. So I saw you had Ali on the other day, and obviously you're on Fresh and Fit, and we're talking now because I'm sort of connected with that space. Is that a direction that you want to go into further? Is that because you're obviously interested in these issues? Is this something you want to kind of explore further and sort of get more involved in this particular debate, or is it just one of many things that you're interested in talking about?
Well, I'm interested in talking about a lot of things. I love politics, so there's a whole list I can go through. I think right now the space interests me more than others, just because I feel like there's a lot of people in the space that are suffering, and it's a type of suffer. It's not like I really care about poverty. I'm actually going to Colombia for a week soon to help out. Yeah, like on a humanitarian aid mission.
Oh, nice. Whereabouts?
It's like it's I think the YU tribe or something. It's basically in a desert in Colombia.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but basically, poverty, like I'm very interested in helping like poverty, like economic issues like that, breaking the cycle of poverty. But when it comes to red pill issues, this seems like something that people can do. I don't say by themselves. Everybody needs help, but there's steps that you don't necessarily need to have to rely on, like let's say like a government to change, right?
Yeah.
Like there are like actions that you as an individual can realistically change to be able to attract more women, or find somebody who you appreciate or you like. But when it comes to something like poverty, well, that's a lot more systemic, a lot more complicated. Like, there's a lot of things the government can do to like help break out cycles of poverty. Well, when it comes to this is much more individualistic, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I agree. You saw Biden was over in Ukraine, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yesterday, which was kind of interesting. They always have to spring those things, because the British Prime Minister was over there about a week before, and they always have to obviously it's always a surprise, isn't it? Because they can't tell anybody before they go, for obvious reasons. So that was cool. So Black Shiny Hairs Portal is saying, Pixie, please fold your hairs as a bun type.
I've never done buns before, but I'm open to trying any new hairstyle.
Well, there you go. Okay. Well, look, I mean, it's been great. It's been great chatting with you. I find all this stuff really interesting, and it's great to get your perspective on this, because of your background and your sort of where you sit on the political spectrum and everything else. I think there's probably, as we said, I think there's probably more we agree with than we don't agree with, really. I mean, but as somebody who's associated with this like space, I'm fairly I'm kind of a centralist anyway, to be honest. And I'm sort of, I think as far as dating's concerned, I mean, my concern with dating is it feels like it's becoming this very politicized thing, and it's almost difficult to talk about. I mean, I suppose one final question I might have for you is, what do you think about actually giving guys dating advice? Do you think that's a bad thing? Because I think there will be some who would feel that almost any dating advice that's given to men is helping them to be sort of manipulative and kind of underhand in a way, which I don't agree with. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like absolutely not. I think a lot of dating advice is focused on just how to communicate better, which I think everybody needs help with, because we get into like our own like little bubbles. We think that other people think the way that we do. And then get frustrated when they don't. So I think, I think that's just like a human nature flaw. I think it's hard for us to realize like people have completely different thought processes and can arrive to a completely different conclusion using this like same words that you did, if that makes sense. Like I can say, I'm happy right now. Two people can take completely different interpretations of that sentence. So I think I think it's totally okay to give dating advice. I wish more people like you were in these red pill spaces, or like you guys had like a bigger platform that like, you know, not to like shade Fresh and Fit, but yeah, like other people who are saying like giving one-dimensional views on like women and men and how they interact. I wish there were more people who gave this sort of advice, because I do think there's a lot of gray area when it comes to communicating, and I think dating advice does help with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know what it's like though. You get more clicks, the more sort of, you know, the rage bait stuff gets more clicks, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, I personally, you know, I just want to put out a message I want to put out, and a lot of the, I think there's a lot of truth in a lot of the red pill sort of observations, but at the same time, as much as I find it interesting to talk about and to sort of consider those issues and stuff. For me personally, my take has always been, okay, right. So what's next? Okay, so that's fine, but how do we then move on from that and just, you know, have a kind of good life, basically. So I'd rather not sort of wallow too much in the problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how most people should be. Otherwise, it's really funny because I hear like, again, I don't want to throw anyone under, but like Sneeko, like he's like, oh, the victim mentality. And it's like, if you're not focusing on solutions or how to make the world a better place for yourself and the people around you and in general, then you're being stuck being a victim. Instead of improving life. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, to be fair to Fresh and Fit, and also I think to Sneeko as well. They do give self-improvement advice as well. You know, they do give advice on exercise and getting your finances right, and you know all of that kind of stuff. So there is that side to it, but I think wallowing in the problem or the perceived problem, I think is ultimately, I don't know. For me, it's just not really how I want to proceed. You know, I'd rather try and find solutions to these things.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Gammy says, any looks advice for men? Looks max, bro.
Yeah, no, I think I have the most basic advice, but it's true because it works, right? Just wear clean shirts, wear deodorant, shower. Oh, this isn't really looks advice, but if you have a girl coming to your apartment, make sure it's clean, okay? Make sure that you don't have like, you know, random shit laying down on the floor, or a bathroom that you haven't washed, because all of that is going to factor into my perception of how you're presenting yourself.
Absolutely. Clean your rooms, guys. So we're going Jordan Peterson now, aren't we? Make your bed.
I think there's some basic advice there. Not that I should talk very much because sometimes I am messy, but yeah.
Good stuff. Well, look, it's been awesome having you on, and hopefully we'll get to chat again very soon. So did you just want to tell people where they can find you, what you got coming up, and those kind of details?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So you can find me on Twitch, Pxie, or on Twitter or Instagram, Pixie, Pxie, love at the end. Content I have coming up. Well, I'm going to Colombia for a week, so we'll see how that goes. I'm interested in doing this type of content, so you'll probably see more of this. You'll probably also see more talking with me with other leftist types, because I don't know if you know this, Troy, but like there is a lot of drama always going on in leftist spaces. People always like trying to eat each other up. So I'm trying to like play a little bit like adversary envoy, just trying to like keep peace or seeing where there's a middle ground, because it's pretty fractured in a lot of places. So if you're interested in seeing leftists fight with each other or agree with each other somewhat, you'll also find out on my channel soon.
Good stuff. Because you've done quite a lot of stuff with Destiny as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is funny because his community really doesn't like me, but I still talk to people.
Why is that?
I feel like it's not all his community. I feel like he has a subsection of people who are very debate orientated and debate mind brained. And if you do not have like the perfect performance, or if you mess up a little bit too much, they take it as like you're a 0 out of 10 because they're comparing you to Destiny, who's a very good debater. So it gets like a little bit overwhelming sometimes, because it's like, oh, like the second I mess up or don't say something extremely clearly, you're gonna have a bunch of people pointing out like everything you did wrong. So I think that's mostly it.
Yeah, there's so many just, I don't know, people with too much time on their hands on the internet, really. I saw Destiny on the Pearly Thing show when he was talking with the Andrew Tate stuff and talking with Andrew Tate's lawyer. He was really good on that, actually.
Yeah, and he's great at what he does. I'm definitely trying to find pointers because I want to get better at my public oration or
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, look, thanks ever so much again. And we will say goodbye to the viewers, but hopefully we'll get to chat again soon. Thanks so much for coming on.
Bye.